That should have been enough to make me curious. It was worse than that, actually. It made me careful. Her name was Mara, and for 8 years she had been the safest person in my life, and the one question I was most committed to never asking out loud. So when she said, "Don't open the blue one," I didn't joke. I didn't pry. I just nodded and carried the heavier box down the hallway like a man with boundaries and no imagination. This was new for me. Usually Mara and I were the opposite of careful. We met because she laughed at my umbrella, not me. The umbrella. It was freshman year, raining hard enough to flatten the campus, and I was fighting with one of those cheap collapsible umbrellas that turn inside out the second the wind notices them. Mara was standing under the awning of the library, dry as a saint, watching me lose with obvious interest. Then she said, "That thing has given up on you." I told her I admired her compassion. She stepped beside me under the umbrella anyway, took one look at how badly it was bent, and said, "If this kills us, I want it noted I never respected your equipment." That was the beginning. After that, she became the person every boring thing turned good around. Coffee tastes better with her. Grocery runs go faster. Bad movies become an event. Even waiting at the DMV with Mara once felt like a story instead of a punishment. Mostly because she spent 40 minutes assigning secret emotional backstories to everyone in plastic chairs. She was funny like that. Dry, unexpected, completely unbothered until she cared, and then suddenly so attentive it made you feel seen in a way that was almost dangerous. For 8 years we had lived in different versions of the same city and somehow still ended up in each other's daily life. Calls on the way home, quick dinners that turned into midnight, emergency errands, birthdays, grief, new jobs, bad dates, family crises, tiny victories. If something happened, Mara usually knew first. And if I'm being honest, that should have scared me sooner. People around us definitely found it suspicious. My sister once watched Mara rearrange my kitchen cabinets because, according to her, "Your spice logic is criminal," and said, So are you two dating, or do I need to be worried in some other direction?" Mara nearly dropped the paprika. I laughed. Then, like always, I moved on before the question could follow me anywhere useful. That was our trick. Get close enough to matter, never close enough to name it. Now she was moving out of her apartment after nearly 4 years there, and I was helping because that's what I always did when she asked. Not because I'm especially noble, because when Mara said, "Can you come over?" I need help packing, and I'm dangerously close to throwing things out based on emotional betrayal. There was no version of me that wasn't already grabbing my keys. The apartment looked wrong, half empty. Too much wall, too many echoes. Her framed prints stacked by the door, books in towers. The kitchen drawers gaping open like the place had been interrupted mid-thought. The lamp in the corner was still on, though. Mara always packed like she was trying not to spook the room. "Why are you moving so many books if you keep claiming you're not sentimental?" I asked, lifting another box. "Books aren't sentiment," she said. "They're evidence." "Of what?" "That I have taste and history." "Those seem expensive to transport." She smiled without looking at me. "You're free to leave at any time." That was the rhythm with her. Half teasing, half true, and somehow warmer than either of those things should have been. We worked for 2 hours, kitchen first, then shelves, then the closet where she found a sweater I'd left there in February and said, "This is your fault," like I had personally arranged her attachment to objects. By 10:30, also the apartment smelled like cardboard, dust, and the takeout noodles we'd abandoned on the counter an hour earlier. We were both tired enough that the edges of things had gone soft. That was when the blue box happened. It wasn't dramatic. I was carrying a stack of framed prints from the bedroom when Basil, her awful cat, who moved through life like a rich man with no empathy, launched himself onto a half-packed chair, missed, hit a side table, and sent one small blue storage box skidding onto the rug. The lid popped off. Mara turned so fast it almost looked like pain. "Don't!" Too late. I wasn't snooping, I didn't even kneel. But 3 envelopes had slid halfway out, and all of them had the same thing written across the front in neat dark ink. My name. Not just once. 3 different envelopes, 3 different dates, same name, same handwriting, same sudden feeling that the room had dropped 2 degrees, and I had somehow become the least prepared person in it. I looked at the box. then at Mara. She was standing completely still, one hand still on the bedroom doorknob, face drained in a way I had never seen before. Not angry. Worse. Exposed. I wasn't trying to read anything, I said. I know. Her voice was flat, controlled too carefully. That made it worse. I set the frames down by the wall. Why is my name on Eli? That was all she said. Just my name. But it landed like a warning. I should have backed off, I know that. But 8 years is a long time to spend not asking the right question. And there was something about seeing my own name on those envelopes that made every skipped question in my life feel suddenly expensive. Mara, I said quietly. What is that? She looked at the box, then at me, then away, like she was actually considering whether she could still lie and have either of us survive it. When she finally spoke, her voice had gone softer. Not weak, just tired of hiding. Those are letters, she said. I can see that. Yes, she said. That's the problem. I waited. She folded her arms, unfolded them, then gave a short, helpless laugh that sounded nothing like her usual one. I wrote the first one after our first winter here, she said. Then another after your sister's wedding. Then one the night you called me from that rooftop in Brooklyn because you said the skyline looked unreasonably lonely, and I knew you only say things like that when you're trying not to fall apart. My heartbeat had stopped being useful. Mara, she looked at me then, really looked at me, and in whatever she saw on my face made her eyes shine in a way I was not ready for. I never sent them, she said. Any of them. How many are there? That got another one of those small, helpless laughs. 8, she said. The room went completely still, because now I understood what she meant. Not the box, not the letters, the number. 8 years, 8 chances, 8 versions of whatever truth she had been dragging behind her every time we laughed something off and moved on. I don't know what showed on my face then, but it changed hers instantly. Her mouth tightened. Her shoulders did too. Like she had already decided she'd said too much and was bracing for me to make the rest unbearable. Then she said the one thing I genuinely wasn't ready to hear. I wrote one every time I almost told you I was in love with you. The cat chose that moment to jump back onto the chair and knock a roll of packing tape onto the floor. It hit the rug between us with a dull bounce, and somehow that stupid sound made everything feel even more real. 8 years, 8 letters. 8 separate times Mara had almost said the one thing I had apparently spent the same 8 years carefully not asking. I looked at the blue box, then back at her. You wrote one every time, I said. Mara nodded once. Not dramatic, not teary, just tired in that stripped-down way people get when the truth has finally outrun their ability to manage it. I never meant for you to find them like this. That's not what I'm stuck on. What are you stuck on? I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. The fact that I can remember every date you just named. That caught her off guard. I saw it. She blinked, frowned slightly, then asked, What does that mean? It means I remember the first winter here because that was the night we carried your bookshelf up 3 flights of stairs, ordered bad Thai food, and you fell asleep on the floor before we ever unpacked the dishes. I looked at her. I remember my sister's wedding because you danced with my niece for 40 minutes and somehow still spent most of the night next to me. I swallowed once. And I remember the rooftop in Brooklyn because I called you instead of anybody else when I felt like my life was coming apart. The room had gone impossibly quiet. Mara stood there, in the middle of half-packed boxes and lamplight, looking at me like she didn't know if what she was hearing was saving her or making it worse. Then she asked almost offensively, So? That was very Mara. Cornered, exposed, and still somehow finding enough steel to demand clarity instead of comfort. I stepped closer. So I'm stuck on the fact that I almost told you things on those nights too. That landed, hard. Her whole expression changed. Hope first, then fear right behind it. Don't, she said quietly. I frowned. Don't what? Don't say something kind just because you found the letters. That one irritated me more than it should have, not at her. At the thought that she had loved me for 8 years and still expected mercy instead of honesty. Mara. I moved around the box and stopped in front of her. Do I look kind right now? That got the faintest, most startled almost laugh. No, she admitted. You look overwhelmed. Good, because I am. I rubbed a hand over the back of my neck. Not because the idea of you loving me feels impossible, because it doesn't. And that is the problem. She didn't move. Neither did I. The apartment felt smaller than it had an hour earlier. Less like a place being packed up and more like a room that had finally run out of hiding places. I've spent years pretending there was no point in asking certain questions, I said. But if I'm being honest, every time something mattered, you were the person I wanted first. Every time something went wrong, you were still the person I wanted first. And every time I tried to build something with somebody else, it felt like I was borrowing time from the part of my life that already belonged to you. Mara looked down for 1 second, then back up. Her eyes were brighter now, not falling apart, just no longer guarded. You say things like that, she murmured, and then act surprised I wrote letters. I smiled despite myself. That softened something in her face, but not enough to erase the tension completely, because there was still one more thing sitting in the room with us. The move. The boxes. The fact that this was all happening while her life was literally being packed shut around us. I glanced at the stacks by the door. Are you moving because of this? That made her go still again. Partly, she said after a beat. That hurt more than I expected. Mara. No, be fair. She folded her arms, then immediately dropped them again, frustrated with herself. It's closer to work, the lease was ending. I'm not fleeing the city in a velvet cloak. That sounds dramatic enough to be your real plan. Don't interrupt me when I'm trying to be vulnerable. Sorry. She exhaled and looked around the apartment like it had become evidence. It just started feeling crowded in here, she said quietly. Not physically, just... Her eyes came back to mine. Too many versions of almost. That one got me. Because I knew exactly what she meant. The chair where we always ended up talking too late, the kitchen counter where she leaned when she wanted to keep me there 5 minutes longer, the couch where apparently a blue box had been sitting full of my name for longer than I had any right to understand. What were you going to do with them? I asked, glancing at the box. Her mouth tightened. Throw them out. I looked at her. Tonight? She nodded once. That changed everything. Not the feeling, the urgency. Because suddenly I could see the whole shape of it. Mara packing up her apartment, packing up 8 years of almost confessions, and trying to drag herself into a cleaner future by destroying the one place she had ever let the truth exist in full. No, I said. She frowned. No? No. Mature argument. I'm serious. So am I. I stepped forward until there was almost no space left between us. You do not get to throw out 8 years of loving me and call that closure before I answer. Her breath caught. That was the line. The one that changed the room from confession into choice. Mara looked at me for one long second, and when she spoke, her voice had gone soft in that dangerous way it only did when she stopped protecting herself. Then answer. I didn't kiss her right away. I didn't joke. I didn't give us another exit. I just told her the truth. I wasn't ready to hear it, I said, because once you said it, I couldn't keep pretending I'd been confused. I held her gaze. I've been late, not blind. Her face changed at that, opened. Just enough. I kept going. I think I've loved you in every ordinary way for so long it stopped looking dramatic enough for me to name it. Grocery runs, bad coffee, rooftop calls. The fact that when anything happened, good or awful, you were the person I reached for first. I smiled a little helplessly. Apparently, I needed a blue box to force me to stop being an idiot. That got her. Not a big laugh. A small, broken, relieved one. Then she asked, So, what happens to the letters? I looked at the box, then back at her. Future ones? I said. You hand them to me. That did it. And whatever last piece of distance she'd been holding on to broke on her face so clearly it nearly undid me. Mara. She shook her head once, smiling and crying nowhere near enough to be dramatic about it. That was very unfairly good. I've had 8 years to accidentally prepare. You did not know about the letters. No, I said. But I knew about you. Then I kissed her. Soft first, almost disbelieving. The kind of kiss that feels less like a sudden beginning and more like finally stepping into a room you've both been circling for years. When we pulled apart, she stayed close, forehead near mine, smiling in that quiet, stunned way people do when something they wanted turns real before they've finished bracing for disappointment. Well, she whispered, that was worth the cat. I laughed softly. Basil's going to be unbearable about this. He already is. A week later, the new apartment still had unopened boxes and terrible lighting in the kitchen, but the blue box was on the top shelf instead of in the trash. Mara claimed that was temporary. I claimed she was a liar. She said if I wanted better storage decisions, I could start by alphabetizing my own spices before criticizing hers. And the strange thing was, none of it felt fragile after that. Not rushed, not awkward, not like we had broken something good by naming it. It felt like 8 years of almost had finally decided to become a real life. So tell me, if you were in my place, what would you have done after hearing what she'd been hiding for 8 years? Leave it in the comments. And if you like this story, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel. I'll see you in the next one.